One of the most prolific execution structures deployed throughout history was and still is the gallows. Different variations of the method have been developed. For example, in America, they even came up with the upright jerker, a gallows which saw someone being sent into the air in an attempt to snap their neck rather than plunge through a trapdoor. This ultimately was not successful, and the intended outcome saw the upright jerker not adopted across different states. Hanging as an execution method changed over the centuries. It began with slow strangulation, as someone would be placed over a gallows with a noose secured around their neck before they were then taken off a stool and left whilst the air was being choked out of them. Some cruel executioners even cut people down a number of times and repeated the proceedings for particularly rough criminals to entertain the crowd. But the gallows was used for torture also, and this was known as half-hanging, as someone's life would not be brought to an end, but it was used in an attempt to extract information from a prisoner. Today we look at this. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Half-hanging has been used in England for many centuries, and it was actually part of the hanging, drawing and quartering execution method. In its simplest form, half-hanging was to bring a condemned person to a gallows, secure the noose around their neck whilst they were stood on a platform or a stool, and then the executioner would remove the stool. The point of this was so that the prisoner was then left hanging by their neck, and they would be struggling and kicking in front of the crowd as their life slipped away, and they desperately tried to fight for air. But just before death occurred, then the executioner would cut the condemned down from the gallows, cutting the noose. Sometimes these people needed reviving using smelling salts and other things and other remedies to try and bring them around. With the hanging, drawing and quartering execution method, the condemned's ordeal following their half-hanging was just the beginning, as they would then be subjected to some harrowing behaviour from the executioner. Crowds enjoyed seeing the half-hanging, and they wanted to see the most amount of suffering as possible, especially for those who were terrible criminals and who had committed shocking crimes. But it was used as a method of torture also, used to extract information from suspects. Half-hanging was done to force information from someone, and the rope would be secured around a victim's neck, and they would then be hanged from a post, pole or any structure. The point of this was so that they believed they would be killed, and that the victim at the point of desperation and death would then give over information and confess for their crimes. As the victim was hanging, the torturers would usually wait until the victim passed out to then slacken the rope and get them down. If they did not give over any information, then the half-hanging torture ordeal could be repeated many times until the torturers were satisfied. Often people needed reviving, as they had lost consciousness too. This was used during the Irish Rebellion of 1798, in which there was a large insurrection and uprising against the British Crown in Ireland. This lasted around 4 months and would result in the rebellion's suppression, but British governmental forces and the militia would use half-hanging as a method of torturing and extracting information from those who were suspected of being rebels. This was even performed upon a woman named Anne Devlin, who conspired to renew the insurrection against the British Crown. She was tortured heavily at the time after her arrest, and it was said that her half-hanging was not successful as she gave over little to no information. The torture and ordeal that Anne Devlin was forced to undergo later secured her release from prison. Half-hanging is often associated with executions on a gallows that did not go well and were not successful. There have been a number of people who, when they were executed on the gallows, seemingly were not technically dead, and these men and women then awoke hours after their executions. One example of this is half-hangit Maggie Dixon, who was hanged on the gallows in 1721 in Edinburgh, but after her ordeal, noises were heard from the coffin, and she did revive, and she then went on to live a rather long life, being known as Half-Hangit Maggie for the rest of her days, and she even used to drink in some of the inns next to where she had been hanged. There was also the case of Half-Hanged Smith, John Smith, a thief who was executed on the Tyburn gallows. People even pulled down on his legs to end his suffering and bring about his death quicker, but after around 15 minutes on the gallows, he was cut down when he then recovered. Later, Smith said about his ordeal that, "I remember a great pain caused by the weight of my body. My spirits were in great uproar, pushing upwards. When they got into my head, I saw a great blaze of glaring light that seemed to go out of my head in a flash. Then the pain went. When I was cut down, I got such pins and needles, pains in my head, that I could have hanged the people who set me free. But half-hanging was a brutal and shocking torture and execution method, which was deployed to terrorise and make people believe that their end was coming, so they would give over information regarding plots or conspiracy. There would throughout history have been some examples of this torture method going wrong, which would have resulted in the death of someone too. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.